Boa tarde a todos, sejam muito bem-vindos a esse tribunal. Eu vou agradecer o convite, como a minha colega Daniela Bandeira falou, eu integro a Comissão de Sustentabilidade do Tribunal já há 12 anos. Estou aqui substituindo a doutora Eunice, que já falou pela MB, porque também eleita com a chapa dela como diretora da nossa Associação de Magistrados. Quero agradecer o convite, especialmente cumprimentar a todos aqui presentes, na pessoa do ministro Benjamin e na pessoa do presidente do Tribunal de Justiça do Rio, que tem se mostrado muito sensível à nossa causa. O ministro Benjamin já é um ícone nacional e internacional, e o nosso presidente Henrique Figueira tem se mostrado extremamente sensível à causa relacionada à sustentabilidade. Tem dado um apoio imenso à nossa comissão para trabalhar as questões do judiciário nesse aspecto. Eu vou pegar o gancho da desembargadora Cristina Gaulia, cumprimentar aqui o desembargador Elton, que foi eleito presidente do TRE, mas junto, né, comigo e especialmente por ser mais antigo também, é um exemplo para nós nesse campo. Ele é um especialista em direito ambiental também. E eu vou pegar aqui o gancho nas palavras da desembargadora Gaulia, quando falou da necessidade de sensibilizar o juiz, já que ela agora é diretora da nossa escola de magistratura. Eu digo sempre que todo juiz tenha o germe, tenha o gene, tenha o micróbio do direito ambiental no seu dia a dia, porque muitas vezes os critérios e os conceitos de sustentabilidade não aparecem estampados nos processos. Às vezes eles estão por trás e é preciso um olhar perspicaz para anotar esse acontecimento. Antes de chamar os nossos speakers, né, dos Opening Video Addresses, eu gostaria de fazer uma homenagem a uma personagem que nos falta nesse congresso, e que estava sempre a nos alegrar e a andar pelas coxias, porque sempre fazia parte da organização, que é o nosso querido desembargador Eladio Lecei, que nos deixou esse ano, há poucos meses atrás, que era diretor da nossa Escola Nacional de Formação e Aperfeiçoamento de Magistrados. E é com a imagem dele, com as lembranças que tenho dele, que passo a palavra, então, ao nosso primeiro Opening Video Addresses e Speakers, Bruno Oberle, diretor-geral da UCN Genebra, que nos brindará por vídeo.
Your Excellencies, colleagues and partners, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here today and deliver the welcoming remarks at the second IUCN World Environmental Law Congress. Theme of today's event revolves around the role of judges in achieving environmental law for 2030 and beyond. And this is subject close to my heart as a former State Secretary for Environment. We all know how crucial a strong legal system is to achieving SDG. Indeed, it is directly embedded within SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. It is within this context that I will speak today about the outcomes of the recent IUCN World Conservation Congress and reflect on the recently concluded Climate COP in Glasgow. You all know about the IUCN World Conservation Congress that ended less than 3 months ago in Marseille, France. There, we set the nature conservation agenda for the next decade and beyond. This was through both resolution and commitments to urgently address the interlinked climate and biodiversity crisis. I'm proud of the legally oriented resolution passed, such as the resolution number 60, measuring the effectiveness of environmental law using legal indicators, or resolution 46, strengthening the Global Judicial Institute of the Environment and the Global Institute of Prosecution for the Environment. Coming full circle, knowing that the Global Judicial Institute and the Environment was established at the first IUCN World Environmental Law Congress in 2016. These are resolutions that, when implemented fully, will have a global impact that will contribute to effectively achieving the SDGs. Recognizing the health crisis we are still living in today, the IUCN Congress also urged governments to implement a nature-based recovery from the pandemic, investing at least 10% of global recovery funds in nature. Environmental law will be central to achieving this to ensure that these goals are achieved in a working and effective legal framework. Riding high from Marseille, IUCN went to the climate COP in Glasgow, which concluded less than a month ago. And there we stressed that nature is a powerful ally in the fight against climate change, and we need to invest in nature-based solutions. I am happy that there were commitments made at COP26 to conserve, restore, and sustainably manage forests, oceans, and other ecosystems, for example, steps to combat deforestation and degradation by 2030. I also welcome the finalization of the Paris Agreement rulebook as a major achievement, along with the progress made during the COP towards reducing coal and methane emissions. And in Glasgow, for the first time, world leaders clearly recognized the interlinked relationship between the global biodiversity and the climate crisis, and the critical role that nature plays in both adaptation and mitigation simultaneously. However, my takeaway after Glasgow is that we need to do so much more to truly keep global temperature rise within 1.5 degrees. And this is because the world needs to move from recognition to establishing concrete pathways for delivery. That is where the world of environmental law will be key. And the legal leaders gathered here at the World Environmental Law Congress will play a critical role in shaping the concrete pathways that will enable us to effectively overcome the biodiversity and climate crisis. It is only through cooperation that we can achieve a sustainable world that thrives beyond 2030. Thank you so much. Muito obrigado.
Vou passar a palavra, então, ao senhor Andersen, diretor executivo do Programa das Nações Unidas para o Meio Ambiente, que também nos brindará com as palavras por vídeo. Ele está na UNEP em Nairobi. Pois não.
We must almost halve greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 to have any chance at holding global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We must slow the biodiversity and nature loss to support peace, prosperity and health. And we must stop and clean up that toxic trail of pollution to save lives, millions of lives, each year. The three statements we've heard today strike at very important drivers of the triple planetary crisis: the climate crisis, the nature and biodiversity loss crisis, and the pollution and waste crisis. The Trade and Environmental Sustainability Structured Discussion Statement provides a space for WTO members to discuss how trade policy can mitigate and adapt to climate change and reverse biodiversity loss. And with regards to biodiversity, therefore, this means reaching conclusions on the negotiations on fisheries subsidies so that our fish stocks can thrive. The statement on fossil fuel subsidies targets one of the biggest barriers to renewable energy. These subsidies encourage greenhouse gas emissions and wasteful consumption and drive down the price of primary plastics, adding to the plastic pollution crisis. And the statement on plastics encourages the exploration of ways trade can promote the transition to a circular economy for plastics. I was particularly pleased to see references to the Basel Convention and growing momentum amongst member states for meaningful action on plastics pollution at the next United Nations Environment Assembly in February 2022. We need to be clear on the full range of consequences of plastic pollution and act at source to address them all. I welcome the three statements. I encourage every WTO member state to get involved, not just in each individual work stream, but in bringing all of them together, because these challenges are intertwined. UNEP and the multilateral environmental agreement that we administer, we are here to help. We can contribute environmental science, data, technological information, and integrated assessment methodologies. We can provide capacity building to WTO members. We can work with partner organizations to enable the business sector to adopt sustainable initiatives in related sectors. Now, trade has been an essential part of human existence for millennia, but how and what we trade needs serious review, not just because of the negative impacts which contribute to greenhouse gas emissions and nature loss, but because the potential of trade in sustainable goods and much needed technology. So again, I welcome these three statements and look forward to working with WTO members to put them into practice.
Vamos então, dando prosseguimento, vou passar a palavra ao senhor Achim Steiner, Administrator do Programa de Desenvolvimento das Nações Unidas. Ele vai falar de Nova York.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to join this high-level segment during the IUCN World Environmental Law Congress. I would like to congratulate Professor Christina Freud on her recent appointment as the chair of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. People and planet are facing multiple interlinked crises, from the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change to ecosystem and biodiversity loss to rising poverty and inequality. These issues are impacting a broad range of human rights while increasing environmental injustice worldwide. Yet major shifts are taking place. Earlier this year, the UN Human Rights Council recognized that having a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a global human right. Over 150 national jurisdictions today already recognize this right. At COP26 in Glasgow, loss and damage were at the very top of the agenda, even if progress continues to be slow. And we are beginning to see citizens across the world invoking legal and constitutional rights to hold their governments accountable. Indeed, the issue of climate change and the continued degradation of our natural world is increasingly moving to the domain of jurisprudence and constitutional law. In this new reality, I see three clear pathways to advance greater environmental justice. Firstly, there is an acute need to extend legal and policy frameworks to allow excluded and marginalized communities access to justice and legal empowerment measures. Countries also need support to advance laws and regulations that spur the equitable and sustainable management of natural resources. To this end, UNDP and many of our partners are working closely with indigenous peoples and local communities to strengthen their rights to own, manage and control land resources. This is vital given that they are stewards of 1/3 of our planet's land. And key frameworks like the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights are helping to ensure that the rights of populations that depend on these resources are respected. Or look to efforts like the Global Wildlife Programme, which is reducing both supply and demand that drives the illegal wildlife trade while strengthening community livelihoods at the same time. Secondly, laws alone are not enough. We need to ensure that an entire cross-section of society participates in vital environmental policies, budgeting and planning, including those most affected by environmental injustice. Look, for instance, to the UNDP Climate Promise. It is helping to ensure that all communities have a say in their country's nationally determined contribution, or NDC. Over 110,000 people have engaged in NDC stakeholder consultations in 67 countries leading up to Glasgow. Women are leading the process in many countries. This gender-inclusive focus is also vital because women are more vulnerable than men to the impacts of climate change. The digital divide and the lack of affordable broadband also require more attention. When people are trapped offline, their ability to advocate for change in critical areas like climate action is stifled. Therefore, the UN is helping to equip people with the digital skills they need to be actively involved in the environmental policies that affect their lives and livelihoods. Thirdly, the UN Secretary General's call to action for human rights draws attention to the increasing need to also respect the rights of future generations. In this field, the role of national human rights institutions, or NHRIs, to advance climate and environmental justice is crucial. At UNDP, we have supported over 100 NHRIs to boost their ability to address the human rights implications of climate change and environmental degradation. Taken as a whole, in 2020, more than 31 million people benefited from improved access to justice through the kind of work that UNDP does with countries and through their judicial systems. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, the rule of law and justice are becoming a much more dynamic part of our toolkit to tackle climate action and halt the war on nature. The entire UN family and key partners like IUCN are working with communities to ensure that the rights of people and the rights of nature are respected, protected, and promoted. At UNDP, that is achieved through our global program on rule of law and human rights and our closely linked nature, climate and energy portfolio. This engagement is helping to slow the destruction and degradation of our natural world, driving progress across the global goals. And crucially, this contribution also boosts respect for human rights, which are dependent on a clean, healthy and sustainable environment. In sum, our collective efforts are more important than ever. They are helping to charge the battery that will electrify or power the new efforts in every corner of the globe to secure the future of both people and planet. Thank you, and I wish you a very successful Congress.
Dando prosseguimento, vamos chamar a senhora Elizabeth Mrema, secretária executiva da Convenção Biológica da Diversidade, Montreal.
Distinguished judges, participants, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all and all protocols observed. It is my pleasure to address you at this session, and my focus today will be on the role of judges in advancing the biodiversity aspects of environmental law. As you may know, one of the three important global environmental treaties presented at the 1992 Rio Summit on Environment and Development is the Convention on Biological Diversity, commonly known as CBD. CBD is an international treaty intended to promote the conservation of biodiversity, the sustainable use of the components of biodiversity, and the equitable sharing of the benefits deriving from the use of its genetic resources. It has a universal application, having a total of 196 states and the European Union as its parties. Over the years, the CBD has also contributed to the development of international legal frameworks, for example, in the area of promoting safe use of modern biotechnology on one hand, and regulating commercial bioprospecting on the other, with the adoption and implementation of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, and the other, the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing, respectively. Biodiversity, ecosystems, and the essential services that they provide are the foundations for all life. Yet, human activities are destroying biodiversity at a faster rate than at any other time in the history of humankind. Additional pressures are being placed on the life support systems of our planet by population increase, by climate change, and land degradation. Biodiversity loss is closely linked with climate change. Not only climate change exacerbates loss of biodiversity, but also loss of biodiversity itself diminishes our ability to adapt to climate change and mitigate its effects. There is therefore an urgent need to act and change our destructive habits, since business as usual approach is no longer a viable option. Acknowledging this continued loss of biodiversity and the increasing pressures on the life support systems, the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity adopted in 2010 the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity and associated targets for the period 2011 to 2020, also known as the Aichi Biodiversity Targets. According to the latest edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook launched last year in September, the world has unfortunately not been able to meet fully most of the Aichi targets. In this context, and with biodiversity loss continuing unabated, the parties to the convention recognized the urgency needed to ensure that actions in the coming decade are set on a sustainable path. Therefore, they established a process for the preparation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which will replace the 2011-2020 Biodiversity Strategic Plan and its Aichi targets. The process is at an advanced stage. A draft Global Biodiversity Framework has been prepared, and its various elements are being negotiated within the working group established for this purpose. While still a work in progress, the framework is expected to be instrumental in bringing the world closer to living in harmony with nature by 2050. The vision that the global community has set way back in 2010 when adopting the biodiversity targets for the previous decade. An ambitious biodiversity framework would allow parties to the convention, other biodiversity-related conventions, and all other stakeholders to develop ambitious national and regional goals and targets through their national strategies and action plans, and facilitate the regular monitoring and review of progress at global level, including progress in the achievements of Sustainable Development Goals. The implementation of the upcoming Global Biodiversity Framework at national level is projected to be guided principally through national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and or other instruments that may be adapted at national level. This approach allows countries to plan to address the threats to biodiversity, considering their specific circumstances and national priorities, and act upon such plan. In this context, we know that the judiciary can be a key ally in advancing the biodiversity agenda and supporting the implementation of national biodiversity strategies and action plans through its involvement in ensuring compliance with environmental impact assessment requirements, environmental standards and procedures, implementation of biodiversity laws derived from the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, prosecution and adjudication of environmental crimes such as poaching and illegal logging. The draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is currently under consideration, provides that the framework will be implemented taking into account rights-based approach. Judicial enforcement will therefore have a clear role in developing our understanding of these rights, in the identifying and applying remedies in cases of clear violations, and in providing decisions on test cases which can lead to systemic institutional changes to prevent violation of rights, to a clean and healthy environment that we all deserve to have. While there are limits to the judiciary's function in interpreting and applying the law, it nevertheless can play a crucial role in ensuring the coherence and implementation of legal or policy frameworks across sectors. The judiciary may be called upon to find a balance between competing priorities of different ministries or different levels of government, or reconcile a variety of sector-specific laws and regulations which may not take into account the interconnected nature of biodiversity and ecosystems. A judiciary that is aware of the importance of biodiversity in the lives and well-being of people is also able to not shy away from the difficult decisions required in complex cases. Even the sectors that may impact biodiversity adversely, such as agriculture, forestry, fisheries, are very much dependent on biodiversity. Taking a decision now to promote the conservation and sustainable use of the resources will ensure the continued vitality and the long-term sustainability of these sectors. There is an important role for the judiciary in reconciling conservation with economic development. As an independent branch, not affected by short-term political pressures to support unsustainable practices, the judiciary is well placed to make such difficult but necessary decisions. I call upon the distinguished judges, as well as other members of the legal community, to continue to extend or enhance their professional support to their governments and communities so that these governments and communities succeed in their efforts to implement the upcoming global biodiversity framework. Consequently, discussions of the role of judges in Environmental Law 2030 and beyond could not have come at a better moment than now. I thank you for your attention.
Vou passar a palavra então, vamos ouvir o Sr. Thomas Clark, General Counsel, Asian Development Bank, Manila.
Honorable Justices, distinguished speakers, respected guests, colleagues, and friends, Mabuhay from Manila. My name is Thomas Clark, General Counsel of the Asian Development Bank. Thank you for this opportunity to address the second IUCN World Environmental Law Congress, a body of experts dedicated to protecting the environmental rule of law globally. I extend my special gratitude to the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law and all the organizers for inviting me to deliver remarks at this very important conference. As you know, we meet in the aftermath of COP26 in Glasgow and the high-level segment of the UN Biodiversity Conference in Kunming, where there were calls for greater ambition and transformative action to tackle environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, and climate change. Indeed, we need innovative ideas and investments to enable the big changes required to achieve a more sustainable planet. At the outset, we really need a new mindset where the world commits to conscious and continual improvement, to core values such as equity, empathy, collaboration, and an understanding of the interlinkages with all life on Earth and how that should guide how we live. Certainly, there has been this shift in thinking in the legal world, with lawyers understanding the interconnection between the natural world and our practice to a great degree. Whether one is an in-house counsel at a company, a lawyer at a private law firm, or a development lawyer at a multilateral development bank such as ADB, lawyers now consider sustainable development issues in advising clients and devising innovative legal solutions. Also, policy and legal frameworks about biodiversity and environmental protection and climate action cannot exist in silos. Remember the disaster of palm oil and its supposed capacity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Judges and lawyers must also avoid silos in our daily work. We must be willing to be curious about the challenges, the science, and potential solutions, and we must be ready to change how we work when the evidence reveals that new outcomes are needed. Moreover, there must be more investment in the Sustainable Development Goals that play a crucial role in managing global risks such as climate change and pandemics and safeguarding the social and economic progress we've made over the past several decades. Of course, investment means big finance and MDBs such as the ADB have been providing billions of dollars to assist countries to achieve the SDGs. For example, ADB provided $21.6 billion in financing to support countries' deliveries of the SDGs in 2020 alone. However, our investments must include investment into good governance also. In fact, investing in better governance and supporting more effective, accountable, transparent, and inclusive institutions is a key strategic priority for many of the MDBs. This includes investments into core institutions that uphold and implement laws and policies in our client countries. One key institution that ADB has been investing in quite a bit is the judiciary, due to their important role in affecting sustainable outcomes in our developing member countries. Under ADB's Office of the General Counsel's Law and Policy Reform Program, since 2010, we have been assisting judiciaries in the Asia and Pacific region with more effective and efficient adjudication of environmental disputes, and more recently, even complex climate change disputes. These types of specialized cases are often complex and require judges to possess technical know-how in multiple disciplines, including understanding the scientific basis for the law to adjudicate effectively, as well as the policy and the rationales behind them. Judges have also expressed a need to be connected with more experts and expressed a need for regional knowledge sharing. This is an area where ADB, frankly, excels. And over the last decade, various courts in Asia and the Pacific have made significant progress, led by champion chief justices and high court judges, and working together with ADB, the United Nations Environment Program, IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law, Global Judicial Institute on the Environment, and other important development partners. Asian courts have established green benches or green courts, judicial certification programs on environment, and promulgated environmental rules of procedure. Another important outcome has been the creation of the first of its kind Asian Judges Network on the Environment, a dynamic platform for judicial capacity building and multilateral exchanges on environmental education. ADB has also produced numerous knowledge resources, such as the recently published climate litigation reports focused on jurisprudence in the Asia and Pacific region, which is being translated into multiple languages. We are particularly proud of this work product. Perhaps the most satisfying outcome is the enhancement of environmental jurisprudence. For instance, judges who have participated in ADB's programs have gone on to pen landmark judgments, such as the Lagari versus Pakistan case, which is being cited as a precedent even beyond Asia. It is only with sustained support of the judiciaries over the last 10 years that has made these achievements possible. And during this crucial time of complex development landscape, it is even more critical that multilateral development banks, such as ADB, continue to support our judiciaries. I am truly delighted to report that ADB launched the next phase of our judicial capacity building program early this year. For this new technical assistance, we have taken a cross-sector and thematic approach and have included a commercial component due to the convergence with environment and climate change issues. Over the coming decade, judges will face even more challenging issues. We know that climate change and environmental lawsuits will become increasingly common for judges. Judiciaries can respond to this change by building technical capacity within their ranks and creating processes that enable efficient, effective, and fair resolution of climate and environment disputes. Such preparation will allow judges to uphold the rule of law, thereby supporting the legislative and policy intent of governments and the Sustainable Development Goals. In conclusion, sustainable development is complex. It requires new ways of thinking, new partnerships, and a new way of investing. And ADB is committed to investing in our judiciaries. Again, I would like to profoundly thank you for this great opportunity. And I look forward to meeting all of you in person one day I hope very soon. Until then, please stay safe and well.